This is our last community support webinar before we go on a bit of a summer break with the program. It is on autism and eating disorders, specifically focusing on anorexia and bulimia. We have also previously done one on ARFID, which is available on our YouTube channel. This will be recorded and available tomorrow in a follow-up email and posted on our YouTube channel by the end of the week. We will be doing a Q&A at the end, so if you have any questions that come up during any of the presentations, you can put that in the chat or in the Q&A, and I'll keep a hold of them, and we'll do them at the end. And we're joined today by AsIAM's own Veronica O'Dea from our Dublin One-Stop Shop program that is in its final days of planning and hopefully opening in the near future. She's an OT by background, and she worked in the a eating disorder focused program in Brighton in the UK. And Aisling is a member of the Info Line with me. She's an autistic adult and has a background in early childhood education. And we're also very grateful to have the graduate of the AsIAM Youth Leadership Team, Isabelle Blum, with us. She also only just completed her leaving cert yesterday, so we're very pleased that she took the time to be with us when I think any of the rest of us would be asleep. So we're going to start with Veronica, then go to Aisling, then go to Isabelle, and then have a Q&A. So I'll hand over to Veronica now.
All right, thanks, Bridget. I'll just share my screen. Now, can you see that all okay? Yeah, all good, cool. Yeah, so as Bridget mentioned, I've been working for AsIAM since January of this year, but my background is that I'm an occupational therapist. And before working for AsIAM, I was actually working for a family eating disorder service as part of the NHS over in Sussex in England. And this was a community team, and I would have worked with young people from about the ages of 10 to 18, but also with their parents and family as well. And in this role, I worked with young people with a variety of different eating disorders, mainly anorexia and bulimia. And many of these young people were autistic. And during this time, I really saw the importance of considering how their experience was different to those who are neurotypical experiencing eating disorders, and that the treatment approaches required adaptations and adjustments. So today I'll be drawing from my own clinical experience, but also the current research in this area of autism and eating disorders. And I tried to really focus on research that is centered around those with lived experience, and also that of parents and carers. And I think it's important to say that though I'll be giving some general advice, that when I think back to all the different young people I worked with, everyone was really unique in terms of what helps them, in terms of what we focused on. And if you're someone who is experiencing an eating disorder or you're a parent or carer, it is really important to go with the advice of the professionals that are involved, whether that's your GP or the eating disorder team, and that this might be more general information and areas you might consider exploring. Okay. So, as Bridget mentioned, and mainly due to time constraints today, I will mainly be focusing on anorexia, and this would be the eating disorder that I would have most experience in working in. So it's characterized within the DSM-5 by severe restriction of energy or food intake, an intense fear of gaining weight, and a disturbance of body image. But I think I've put some other eating disorders on the screen because it's important to have an awareness of other eating disorders as some can appear on a surface level to be very similar, but the actual approaches and treatment can be very different. So it's important to work out actually which is someone experiencing. And as Bridget said, we do have a separate webinar on ARFID. So I think it's important to mention that for many autistic people, they may have different eating habits in terms of what types of food one feels comfortable eating, and maybe how the food is presented, where someone feels comfortable eating it, and around who. And there may be differences there, but that may not actually be harmful or an issue, and the person could be physically stable and have everything they need nutritionally. But then there's that question of when is there actually an issue? When do you know that you need to go seek help? And when does it become an eating disorder? And I think this can be a bit of a tricky question and take time to work it out. But some things to explore might be what emotions are associated with eating for that person. So are they negative emotions like guilt, like shame, and what extent of distress is caused by eating? And how preoccupied is the person with thinking about food, thinking about eating, and worrying about it? Is the person worried about weight or body image? And that might be some kind of indication as towards what type of eating disorder they're experiencing. Also, whether the eating behaviors, are they a historic trait, something that's been there since the person was very young, or is it something that's very recently developed? Are there physical health risks? Is the person nutritionally compromised? And one of the main things is are the eating difficulties preventing the person from living what is to them a full and meaningful life? So it's being open-minded and listening to the person who's experiencing these eating difficulties, but also listening to the people who are around them, who know them very well. And if there are concerns, to try go seek support as soon as possible, because early intervention is the best. Though it can be tricky to get that help at times, it is best to try seek it out as soon as possible. So, thinking about autism and anorexia, the co-occurrence of anorexia and autism is well established, and research estimates that between 20 to 30% of those in treatment for anorexia display diagnostic features that are characteristic of autism. And I find this visual, which is made by Livia Sarah, who's someone with lived experience, to be quite helpful to explain some of the connections there. And as you can see above, on the surface level of the iceberg, there's all the eating disorder behaviors, which may appear very similar for someone who's neurotypical and someone who's autistic. But looking below the surface, what may have caused the eating disorder to develop and what might be maintaining the eating disorder is often different and needs to be considered and explored. So some of those areas that I find particularly helpful to think about and explore with young people, the young autistic people I worked with, and firstly was communication and understanding. So thinking about how information about food and eating is communicated and where someone is getting their understanding about food, so particularly of language around food. We often hear a dialogue around foods being healthy, foods being good or bad, naughty foods even at times. Uh, People also talking about certain body types. And if you're someone who may take things quite literally, if you're receiving all this information, you might really take it on board and run with it. If you're particularly someone who doesn't like getting things wrong, and you find it helpful to categorize things, this information could be very harmful. And it's really important to think about what the person is absorbing from the people around them, what the people around them are saying, and also other sources, whether it's media, and working on helping the person to have those critical skills to know what is helpful for them and what is not. Um, and I think this quote from a study of parents and carers from 2022 sums things up well. When the parent said that all her life, my daughter had been surrounded by women who would talk about dieting, and my daughter knew that's what's important, even though she didn't care about what she looks like, but she knew that it's a thing for normal women, for other women, and she wants to be the same. And so thinking about all that information that someone is taking on about food, about eating, and also around psychoeducation. And psychoeducation is so important for someone experiencing an eating disorder because they need to be able to understand what is going on for them, what that eating disorder is. Um, and often I would have seen that this information would be given verbally in an appointment where everyone was quite stressed and tensions were high. And I could see for the young person that information just wasn't going in. And there wasn't any thought about how could that be adapted to communication styles so that the person might have a better chance of understanding that, whether that was using visuals and handouts, thinking about the amount of information that's given at a time and the reasoning behind why certain things had to happen within their treatment. I think sometimes that can be overlooked, but it can be a really important piece. And that person needing time to process that information, and have time to reflect and have and ask questions, and where possible make decisions within their treatment and recovery. A useful tool I found within the work was using communication passports. Unfortunately, within these teams, often the young person, their family would be seeing a great variety of different professionals, and it was often very tiring for them to have to explain their situation and maybe the communication preferences or sensory preferences every single time to a new person. So having that documented that someone could read in advance or could be shared with school or with hospital could really help. And there are templates on sites like the Peace Pathway, which is a site specifically for work around autism and eating disorders. But also we would have developed ones ourselves with the young people that they could design in their own way, the way they wanted it, with visuals that they might want on it. And so something that was useful for communication passport. Next area I'm just going to touch on is sensory processing. So this was a big part of my role as an OT and completing sensory assessments. And it was really important because there was often misunderstanding and misinterpretation as to why, say, someone was avoiding certain foods or with certain behaviors. It was often thought it was always the eating disorder, whereas sometimes it was more to do with sensory processing differences. And for example, someone might have been avoiding a certain food because of the taste, the smell, the texture, the visual presentation, even the sound that was created when they ate it or when others around them ate it. But it would have been presumed they were avoiding it because of the eating disorder. And then also around movement and exercise, there was again a misinterpretation that when someone was trying to move, that they were trying to do this to control weight gain, but actually they may have been seeking out proprioceptive input or vestibular input, or be stimming and trying to regulate. And a lived experience quote I've included was someone who said when they were in hospital, I kept getting told off for walking on tiptoes and for fidgeting a lot. And they thought I was doing these things to burn more calories. Except I've been doing it for as long as I can remember. And it may be where there is physical health risk that someone still has to reduce their movement in ways, but giving that understanding as to why the person does want to do it is really important. And then also just to touch on the sense of interoception. So that's our sense of being aware, being able to detect our body cues, so knowing when we're hungry, thirsty, and when we're feeling full. For some people, it's very hard to detect those cues. And we actually had to do a lot of work around being able to understand what those cues were, being able to differentiate them from other emotions. And particularly, I used resources from Kelly Maller, who's an OT over in America, and I've linked some of her resources further into the presentation. And again, with that sense of interception, for others, they had very strong sensitivity to the internal sensations they were feeling. And so the internal sensations associated with eating might be digesting that food, a feeling of bloating. They cause a lot of distress for that person, um, or even the feeling of their body changing, as opposed to even the appearance of their body changing, more that sensation and feeling caused a lot of distress. So they needed extra support and reassurance around this. And then more generally, thinking about the sensory environment in which someone might feel more comfortable eating in, and whether that's the lighting, the noise levels, how could it be adjusted to be more suitable? But also, not only at meal times when someone's eating, but throughout their whole day. And I find where sensory processing hadn't been explored at all, someone might have had to go through their whole day, particularly at school, and that sensory overwhelm was building up and up and up, and then they'd get to mealtime, and it was really, really difficult to eat. So it's thinking very generally around sensory processing as well, but also how can the senses be used in a positive way to calm and regulate, and having a sensory box of items or a bag of items that might be helpful to the person. Um, then just to talk a bit about identity. Um, So I found one of the key considerations in terms of thinking about development of the eating disorder and for the autistic young people was thinking about masking. And most of the young people I worked with were late diagnosed autistic, or they hadn't received an autism diagnosis, but it was only recognized during their time under our service. And they had been trying to manage autistic overwhelm really with no supports in place and no one really seeing that they needed supports in place. Um, and as a result, they were trying to put a structure and a sense of control into their life through food, through exercise, to gain a sense of safety and security where everything was feeling so overwhelming. And then this turned into quite a negative coping mechanism. And in research that was done just last year, it was found that autistic masking, or it was called camouflaging in this study, was a significant predictor of eating disorder symptoms. Additionally, where someone might not feel able to express their autistic identity, or they might be hiding their special interests, the eating disorder can become the identity and become the main interest. Um, and there is that difficulty. It was very similar in England as it is in Ireland of actually getting an assessment and diagnosis of autism due to waiting lists. But also I found for those who actually had a diagnosis, often there wasn't much post-diagnostic support in terms of helping that person to have an understanding of what it meant to them to be autistic or the people around them. And so we ended up often trying to fill that gap within our service, even though that wasn't necessarily what it was designed for. We saw that where someone gained a better understanding of what being autistic meant to them and had the right supports put in place, that really helps in terms of potential to move towards recovery from the eating disorder. And I've included a study by Brown et al. From 2024, who looked at a large scale study of 765 women. And for those with high autistic traits, there was that risk of eating disorders. But for those with a formal autism diagnosis, the risk of eating disorder was substantially lower, suggesting that potential protective factor there. And I've included this quote from a young person I worked with, because sometimes when we're talking about recovery and motivations towards recovery from the eating disorder, we talk about someone getting their life back. But she said, why would I want to get my old life back, where she had not had the right supports in place? She'd been really struggling with autistic overwhelm and burnout, and there was nothing appealing to her about getting that life back. And we really need to think about going forward what did she need in place and what she nearly wanted a new life and identity to move forward with. So we worked on building that sense of identity, and particularly looking at like where supports were needed in school and moving away from where I saw a lot of the young people I worked with, they had a sense of worry or shame about getting things wrong, instead trying to build on self-confidence and self-compassion and a sense and looking for areas where they could have a sense of achievement that wasn't within the eating disorder and a sense of autonomy in other areas of their life. They're looking at their interests, their skills, and what activities were meaningful to them to be a motivator to move towards recovery. Then just to talk about managing change and transitions. So with eating disorder recovery, there is a lot of change involved, and whether that's the physical changes someone might be experiencing or trying specific new care foods again, eating in other places with other people again. And there's a lot of change involved. And even, as I mentioned, moving back to real life and to independence may be something that is a very intimidating thing to face, and maybe maintaining someone's eating disorder. And particularly, I would have seen this with young people I worked with who were kind of on the onset of puberty and were really worried about this stage in their life of the teenage years with everything that might have come with that, whether it was periods or navigating more complex social situations. I know one 11-year-old I worked with she told us she was really worried even about going to nightclubs, which was quite far down the line for her, but it was something that was really preoccupying her mind of just having to move to that stage of adulthood. And so we had to really think about how could someone be given that extra bit of support and information and help through that period so they wouldn't feel as worried about that. And it was really, giving as much information as possible, giving a chance to ask questions, to talk through these fears, and making change and trying new things really gradual and at the right pace for people. And that meant that sometimes it could seem like progress was in quite small steps or taking a longer time. But I found that where we took that time, that the progress was much more sustainable. And then where if things were rushed, sometimes there'd be just a breakdown of trust and we couldn't move forward. So we had to really think about how we paced those changes and made it manageable for that person. Then just to touch on emotional regulation. So there's lots of factors that can affect someone's emotional regulation when they're experiencing an eating disorder, and lack of nutrition, lack of sleep, and also as a teenager, changes in hormones, and being autistic and not ever being shown any tools or strategies to help to regulate emotions. A lot of the young people I worked with were experiencing alexithymia and found it difficult in the first place to identify what emotions they were experiencing. So even coming into an appointment and a question like, how are you, could be a really difficult and uncomfortable question. And some even described how they would be restricting to try to actually numb those confusing emotions and to avoid meltdowns because they got to the stage where they had too little energy for that. So there's a real importance in learning and having those tools to identify and communicate emotions and having practical strategies in place, and not to say try to avoid these emotions or push them away, because we all experience a variety of emotions, but more feeling that they were confident that when these emotions arose that they would be able to get through them, that it would be okay. And we use tools such as the zones of regulation, and the strategies were often very unique person to person of what helped, but we think about communication styles. So if someone was feeling very dysregulated, what would they prefer not to speak, not to be asked questions? And thinking about sensory preferences, would they prefer to be in a darker space, maybe listening to particular music? And also special interests. I worked with a young person whose special interest was Christmas, and she would want to watch Home Alone again and again because she found that comforting. She found the smells of Christmas comforting from the candles she had and having Christmas lights around her. So it was really particular and really unique person to person what did help, but actually discussing that with the person and having the people around them know too what was most helpful. Um, and that co-regulation piece. So particularly for the parents and carers, but also the professionals, everyone who's involved. If really anyone was feeling quite dysregulated, it had that knock-on effect to everyone involved. And if I remember even with us professionals, a young person would definitely pick up on if we were feeling anxious or more dysregulated, and it would heighten everyone. So everyone has to think about what tools they needed for themselves to keep calm and keep working through it. And these skills they were developing were lifelong skills because into recovery they needed those um positive coping skills to have in place for the potential of when things might feel out of control again. Um, and just to move on to social connections and relationships, with eating disorders, it can often mean the person becomes quite isolated. And an eating disorder often thrives on a person being isolated and disconnected from the people around them. Um, so, and particularly when you think about where someone may have developed an eating disorder, for the autistic young people I worked with, it was sometimes to avoid social situations. So they might have started skipping lunch at school to avoid the canteen or to avoid school itself. So they really needed help and recovery to find that appropriate social support network that felt comfortable to them, felt neuroaffirmative to them, and where they felt they could be themselves. And that was a very strong protective factor, and it could become a motivator towards recovery. So I'd work with a young person to think of maybe often they might have been out of school for a time as well. Before even trying to move to getting back to school, we might have thought more about where their interests did lie and what groups there might be around that. And that felt more comfortable to them. So I remember one person, they joined an LGBTQ youth group, and another young person I worked with joined an archery group and forest school. And that felt like a more comfortable place to start socializing and forming social connections again. And socializing might have looked quite different for the young autistic person in terms of their social battery and the amount of people they wanted to socialize with and the ways they connected. But it was finding that appropriate space to do that. Um, and where we built on this sense of connection, it also provided spaces that they felt safe and comfortable in to start eating around others again, which was really important. And it's not only having those support networks there for the person experiencing the eating disorder, but also for everyone else involved. So the carers having support and support networks, and having everyone be on the same page with what is helping and what approach is helping, and whether that's school, the other professionals involved, trying to get consistency in what is helpful. And lastly, in this section, I've included I've linked in a resource that one of my colleagues recently made around autistic love languages that I think is a brilliant resource. And I've included this because a really important thing to do to try make sure someone isn't becoming more and more isolated in their eating disorder is for those around them to try to continue to show their support and love to that person and keep them from becoming isolated. But for the autistic person, they may have different love languages and ways that they show um and want to receive love. And I think that's a really important thing to consider in supporting someone with their eating disorder. And then just lastly, a few further things to consider that sometimes might get slightly overlooked in eating disorder treatment is definitely around coexisting mental health difficulties, such as OCD, gender dysphoria. And I think there's a definite need for holistic care there. I found as a professional, we were often only trained within one eating disorder, within one mental health difficulty, whereas we should have really been more trained in a variety because there was often co-occurrences there. Um, Also, just thinking about other factors and motor coordination difficulties with eating, dental issues, digestive issues being very common for autistic people, and even that thing around executive functioning to organize meals. I know sometimes in the traditional approaches towards eating disorder recovery, there's a push to move towards intuitive eating or just being able to have a sense of knowing when to eat and what to eat. But particularly if you go back to thinking about interoception difficulties, someone may actually still need to keep routine and structure in in their meals and in how they eat. Um, so lastly, I put in just about that what recovery may look like and how um it's just important to keep in mind what I mentioned at the start. Somebody eating differently does not mean it is necessarily harmful or wrong. So recovery for someone who's autistic might look in ways different to someone who's neurotypical, but the main thing is that they are safe and stable and happy. Um, and then I've included a few points around healthcare appointments, what might help for autistic people with healthcare appointments. And you'd hope you get professionals who might know this, but sometimes they might not, and you might need to bring suggestions as to what might help. But these were just some things that the young people I worked with found helpful. And then just if you are looking to access support, going to your GP firstly, and then I've linked the HSE eating disorder teams, and then Bodywise and the eating disorder charity. And then these are just some further resources that I've found helpful in learning more about this area. Some books, some podcasts, and some websites. And then if you like research articles, I've linked in a few there as well. So I'll stop sharing now. And I think, Aisling, you're going to speak next.
Hey everybody, my name is Aisling. I'm a community support officer with AsIAM. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. So my background is in early childhood since 2017. I got my degree in early childhood and I also worked one-on-one with an individual autistic child. This is where I discovered that a lot of my difficulties in my childhood was actually related to autism, and I got a diagnosis myself at the age of 33. Um, I left early childhood and I started working for AsIAM in February of this year, um, because I kind of saw, I suppose, a need for more awareness and a need for more like advocacy for autistic individuals, especially children. Um, I had anorexia nervosa, and I had it from the time I had food issues from the time I can, as long back as I can remember. I always had issues with food. I gravitated towards soft foods. Um, I couldn't have anything that had any kind of a strong taste. I hated spicy foods. And I also choked a lot as a child. Um, my mom from day one was tuned into this. She knew there were things I would eat and there were things I wasn't able to eat. She constantly was trying to, fight for me as a child, being like, my child is not okay. But unfortunately, she was told, oh, your child's just anxious, she's just picky. Um, so I as well had GI issues which run in my family. So when I was about 11, I kind of started to, and it's kind of the age I noticed differences between me and other children, that I had a very different perspective, different interests, and my understanding of things was very different. For instance, after Christmas one year, all the kids had watches and they were starting to learn to read the time, and I was like, they knew how to, and I was like I was never told, nobody told me. It was like walking into a costume party without a costume. That's the way it felt. Lunchtimes I found extremely hard because I couldn't concentrate on eating and socializing at the same time. The two just wouldn't go together. I'd often forget to eat. Um, Even to this day, my hunger cues are very much off. I have to make sure I keep track. Um, like when my mom cried out for help, it was still told, she's quiet, she's a sensitive, she's a shy child. Um, so I think when I started hitting that age, 12, 13, I started to become obsessed with makeup, obsessed with media. It was kind of the 90s era as well, early 2000s, so it wasn't the most particularly helpful era. And I also listened a lot to what was going on around me, parents. A lot of parents were talking about Weight Watchers and diets, and parents would turn around often and say things like, "Oh, I should have started my diet sooner. I'm going on holidays next week." And to me, that translated as, "Oh, the sooner I start, the better." Um, so I also had an issue where I craved a lot of sugar. And I think this was probably because I was forgetting to eat. And then when I would eat sugar and I wouldn't know I was full, I would get very sick. And then the guilt that was associated with that was horrendous. Um, my mom, she kind of started to notice then my new moods just continuously got worse. So she cried out to doctors, they wouldn't listen. She brought me to a homeopath and a dietitian, and I don't think she was a proper dietitian, but she basically told me that sugar, I was having too much sugar in my diet, and that's why I was feeling so awful. She told me, she gave me a structure for food, and that I liked because I liked structure. I was praying for structure. I was praying for routine. Um, so that definitely didn't help. Um, then when my period hit, this is the first instance of self-harm the week before my period. I got more and more obsessed with my appearance. My moods became very erratic. I was melting down at home, but masking all day at home. Um, and then it was just continued commentary. Oh, you're so lucky. There's not a pick on you. And, oh, you can eat what you want. And to me, as a child, that was not connecting with other children and not seen as a part of a group. It was like, oh, they're giving me positive reinforcement for this. So by the time I got to first year, um, the classes were changing. I was being made to bring my books home. I was being made to change. Everything was different. So by the time I got home, I used to just pass out. And then I'd get in trouble for not doing my homework. I'd get in trouble for not listening in class because it was all so overwhelming. Um, so the first thing to go out of that was the food. And it very quickly developed into anorexia. I felt like people were constantly commenting on me, telling me, my mom, she's so quiet, she hides behind her hair, she's so pale, she can't keep up with school. And if I just felt I was happy in my own world and I wished people would just stop commenting all the time. Um, so when the anorexia kind of finally took over, one of the reasons I see for it was kind of a block to all the overwhelm I was feeling. And Veronica mentioned this earlier that she'd experienced this with people. It kind of nearly prevented me melting down because I was so tired. Um, Another thing that I thought was kind of, I suppose, important to note is just like, I suppose I was 15, I ended up in St. Patrick's Hospital. A lot of it was resentment, and the stuff that I would tell my younger self, I suppose, was, you're like, my mom was my advocate the whole way through. Um, Self-care, whatever way that looks, is incredibly important. For my sister, it's painting her nails and literally looking at the television and watching programs. For me, it's watching television and playing a game because it's two less thoughts in my brain. And it just soothes me. Like the autistic mind is so alert, and I kind of feel that by doing two things, like listening and doing something else, it kind of was soothing. Um, Another thing is having a positive role model. When I was in hospital, I had a lot of negative role models, kind of early 2000s era. And I then looked at my older sister, who is an incredibly kind, intelligent person. And I kind of said, well, I'm going to focus on her. I'm going to focus on the positive attributes of her. Um, Another thing is animals. I found animals very, very, and to this day, if I don't have an animal near me, I'm looking for one. Um, Also, if the individual's on bed rest, making it fun. I still kept a routine on bed rest. I kind of saw it as a break for myself at times to bring things in. Like I bring in like I don't know, I'd never done Sudoku before, so I taught myself Sudoku. And then just having a safe space for the individual. My school were very good. They created a safe space for me where I didn't even have to put my hand up and say I need to leave. I would literally cough three times and my teacher would ask me, oh, Ashling, will you come do this for me? And I could go. Um, I did a lot of journaling, a lot of journaling. I've got three baskets full of diaries in my parents' house. Get that anger into something, and that's like just get it out some way, even if you're typing and it's your private thoughts. Um, Self-knowledge is key to mental health, knowing yourself, your likes, your dislikes, and giving yourself time to recover. I didn't do my junior cert because I was in hospital. I didn't do most of fourth year, but I did five subjects in my leaving cert, all pass subjects, and I went off and did beauty for a few years after I finally recovered, and then came back, and I eventually got my degree, and I plan on studying more. So the timeline of the educational system, if it's not put your health first, that will come. That will come. And for an individual experiencing the guilt for me was the worst part of it. And just know that guilt will pass. It was used to block something, and the eating was used to block something, and the guilt comes along with it. But just sitting with it, writing it down, it's just a feeling and it will pass. Another thing is keep track of periods. The week before my period, I get immensely hungry, even if I've eaten my dinners. It's hormones can raise havoc. Also my GP, like I'm 35 years of age, and to this day, my GP keeps track of things for me because thankfully I'm away from the eating disorder now, but he will keep track of it and I don't look. I don't want to know. But obviously every doctor is better. And I'm gonna pass on to Isabelle now.
Thank you so much. Just going to share my screen. Okay, bear with me. Okay, sorry. Geez, okay, what's happening? I cannot see my tabs, and I've accidentally closed it. Okay, I'm just going to pause it, the sharing, because I don't know what I've done. I'm so sorry. Bear with me. I'm so sorry now. Oh, I can move that. That is so handy. Sorry. Okay. Okay, we are back, I think. Now how do I unpause? This is going to be fun figuring that out. Oh, okay. Oh, wait, resume. Sorry. Okay. I also see that there's a big gray bar. I don't know why that's the case. but I'm just going to try and do my best. Anyway, I see it on the shared screen, but not my physical screen. So, getting on with this, if it lets me. So, yeah, my name is Isabelle. I literally only finished the Leaving Cert yesterday, and and it's honestly incredible to have gotten where I am today. Like, I absolutely was. I like 3 years ago, I would not have thought I'd be anywhere close to where I am now. But yeah, so I'm originally from Wicklow, which is the same as Adam Harris. Yeah, I'm originally from Wicklow Town, grew up there, earliest memories there. I now live in Dunleary with my mum. I just finished Youth Leadership Team back in May. I'm an anorexia survivor. I received it. So what's kind of quite different to my story, and actually that statistic you brought up, Veronica, I found interesting, like the idea that an autism diagnosis maybe offers a bit of protection to anorexia, to an eating disorder, because I was diagnosed at age 11. I also have OCD, which has been so prominent in my life since I was at least 4. So yeah, and I wasn't diagnosed with an eating disorder till probably about 14 and a half. I think I developed it around 13. It was like right in the middle of COVID. Anyway, I love how I'm actually like an old granny with computers. I cannot work to save my life. I'm just going to start this off. I'll probably play about 2/3 of it. Just a video that I gave actually right in the middle of my mocks at the Irish Global Health Network.
Using the right weight matters. The Body Pod lets you...
At the Global Health Reimagined with the Irish Global Health Network, and yeah, just I'll unmute it now. And it's about 8 minutes long. I won't play all of it, but I appreciate everyone's patience for watching this.
Autism is a condition that impacts how an individual interprets, understands, and responds to the world around them. I am autistic. Yet as a young child, I was constantly at war with myself. I thought that I was a worthless, broken human being. I couldn't understand why I found socializing among my peers such an alien-like concept. Why was I getting bizarre looks? And why was everyone calling me weird? I quickly learned that talking at length about subjects I was passionate about, and about subjects I was passionate about to whoever will listen to me, and that rocking back and forth, and that flapping my hands when I was happy and rocking back and forth when I was scared, will quickly make you a target for merciless bullying. I also quickly learned that if you don't make eye contact with grown-ups, they won't understand anything that you are saying. Some of my earliest memories are of me of me in tears, trying to communicate my problems to my family members, teachers, healthcare providers, and hearing them say to me, "I can't hear you if you aren't looking at my eyes, Isabelle." But what nobody understood at the time was that for me, eye contact can at times feel as uncomfortable as staring straight into the sun. Eventually, after having learned all this the hard way, I developed a mask. Raise your hand if you've ever had to suppress elements of your personality in order to pass as normal in a social situation. In my case, this looked like forcing eye contact even when it caused me immense discomfort. I suppressed my urges to rock, jump, skip, and shake my hands, movements that better helped me express my emotions. This is called stimming, by the way. I laughed at what were apparently jokes, despite genuinely being unable to tell the difference between them and normal phrases. I forced myself into social situations that never quite made any sense to me, that drained every fibre of energy out of me. Masking is not unique to autistic people. Numerous marginalised groups in both past and present-day society have had to mask. At this point, I became an actor. I couldn't honestly tell you who I was playing, but I can say with certainty that I was not the person standing on this stage today. Not too soon, this performance that I was putting on of a neurotypical child ultimately took its toll. Anxiety started to consume every cell in my body and would continue to do so well into the next 12 years. As a result, I masked more. I couldn't have people thinking I was going mad. At the age of 8, I found myself sitting in a chair facing a lady who said, "Why are you anxious, Isabelle?" Over the next 4 years, I would find myself sitting in that same chair, facing numerous therapists asking me the exact same question. "We all get a little bit anxious sometimes," they would say to me. I took that to mean that I was simply overreacting and everything, I took that to mean I was simply overreacting about everything, and so continued on with my life, convinced that my obsessive habits and rituals were normal to everybody. Finally, at the age of 11, I was diagnosed as autistic. When my mum told me, my life flashed before my eyes, and suddenly everything clicked into place and made sense. Up until this point, I'd been masking who I really was. This diagnosis transformed the way that I viewed myself. In spite of this, the damage was done. The years and years of masking had had a detrimental impact on my mental health. The autism diagnosis from then on was used as a grounds for dismissal in receiving supports for any other battles I was fighting at the time as a result of masking my true self for so many years. The years and years of masking, suppressing my personality, and behaving how society declared I should act, it takes its toll. Eating disorder? No, she's autistic. She's just a picky eater. Self-harming? It's just her way of stimming. This is what I was now hearing from my mental health team. I was being dismissed help at a time that I truly needed it the most. In short, as soon as any psychologist saw the word autism on my chart, it was as if any other struggles I had were simply put down to being highly sensitive. While I eventually did receive eating disorder treatment, it should not have taken my mother the best part of 2 years pleading my case to my doctors. When the day finally came that I was deemed unwell enough and attended my first appointment, my weight and blood pressure had reached dangerously low numbers. Those in the autism community know me best for advocating on behalf of a more accessible and just education system, but not many are aware of my mental health story. According to the Same Chance report of 2024 carried out by AsIAM, Ireland's national autism charity, 71% of autistic people do not find the current health system in Ireland accessible. Other sources are showing that autistic people are 4 times more likely to develop a mental health condition than the non-autistic population. According to Dr. Devon Price in his book Unmasking Autism, clinical research has found that somewhere between 20 and 37% of anorexia nervosa sufferers are autistic. What's more, autistic women are 13 times more likely to die by suicide than autistic men. While acute anxiety goes hand in hand with autism, nobody should be denied access to supports when their struggles go beyond their disability. I am calling on everyone here to take action. Believe autistic people when we tell you that we are struggling. Embrace our differences. You can do this by acknowledging and accepting the fact that we may communicate in ways other than speaking. Understanding that eye contact simply doesn't come easy to many autistic people. Not trying to stop us from stimming, providing we aren't posing risk to harming ourselves or others. And accepting that no 2 autistic people are the same, that we are all different. With regards to healthcare settings in particular, you can start by making your waiting rooms more sensory friendly, having dimmer lights, keeping noise levels to a minimum, providing sensory aids such as ear defenders and fidgets, as well as getting in touch with the patient ahead of time and asking if they have any questions or need any accommodations with regards to the consultation, and as well as sending out a visual guide or information outlining what the patient can expect on the day. I stand here today a fighter. I have fought the battle that is anorexia nervosa and won. These days I continue to... I'm not completely better, nor do I think I will be for some time yet. These days I continue to be at war, fighting what often feels like a losing battle against myself. But I know that the day too shall come when I will defeat the enemy forces that are the demons in my head. Each morning that I wake up and shake each day firmly by the hand is another triumph over the enemy. I'm not sharing my story to become your next inspiration or to make you feel sorry for me. I'm sharing it to inform you, to empower you to take action in making the current health system more accessible and less traumatic for autistic patients. I'm here today to share my experiences in the mental health system as an autistic patient. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for having the patience to watch that. I'm just going to briefly go in. This is my story essentially in 4 heavily summarized bullet points. So again, what's quite unique about my story is that I was diagnosed. I was incredible. I want to say blessed to have had the diagnosis before the eating disorder. However, as I said in that kind of mock TED talk, it was autism was kind of used. Well, I was sharing my story with Adam Harris about a year ago, and I think he worded this perfectly. He said it used autism as a grounds for dismissal. And sorry, my dog is a little bit cranky. And he said you're using your autism as a grounds for dismissal. And I was like, he hit the nail on the head there. That absolutely wasn't the case. So yeah, I developed, so I'm class of 2025. So I was in first year when COVID hit, and that was when I developed the eating disorder. It was kind of more in the second lockdown though, but ultimately what the catalyst was we were in SPHE and we were shown Jamie Oliver's Sugar documentary, and the autism, like black and white thinking, I basically took that to mean sugar, I can never eat sugar again. And while I really admire, like I know Jamie Oliver nowadays is doing a lot of advocacy for neurodiversity, and I respect him for it. I do find him an incredible trigger, even though I respect him so much as a human being. But just that documentary, and just anytime I see him in the media, I just remove myself from the situation or remove the media, because it brings back some really difficult memories. So essentially, by the time the diagnosis came around, I was extremely, I won't go into the specifics, but my physical health had taken a drastic toll. Basically, the eating disorder got really, really bad when I was in second year. And my mum had like really picked up on this, and I was seeing a psychiatrist at the time. I've been seeing the same one since I was 8, and she's like going, I think, like, she was kind of raised the hypothesis of an eating disorder, and she's like going, no, autism, she's just a picky eater, she's just sensitive. And like, I guess I am a picky eater, but even my mum knew it was a lot more than that. And I got to a point where I hadn't had my period in at least a year, and my mum and this actually I went to the GP, and it was only that my mum mentioned that in passing that I was immediately rushed to a hospital, and I was put on IV fluids and stuff, and did not once occur to them to consider my weight or blood pressure or anything. They were like, it's just stress. Looking back, I'm like, second year, what stress do you have in second year? Not to invalidate those genuinely stressful work back then though. So yeah, and it took my mum, like as I said in that video, at least 2 years. It was only when my psychiatrist was like, okay, fine. So we saw a dietitian, and they were like, you need to start, who then immediately contacted my psychiatrist and was like, she needs to be like enter treatment. So it wasn't until I was in third year that I began treatment, and I think the only thing that kept me out of hospital was like I would not miss school. And it wasn't like I wouldn't say school was, there were definitely supports that I should have had but never got, but I was lucky in that, and I'll touch on this a little bit later in the presentation, on some incredible teachers that I had. But those of you that don't know me, I'm also half German, so when you mix autism and German genes, you get a devout rule follower. And I just loved the structure of school. I loved the long days. I loved doing homework, because I suppose engaging in eating disorder habits and studying were just the best ways. I did not have to think, and lost so much of my identity as well at the time. But yeah, it was just, so I was so unwell by the time that I was finally diagnosed with eating disorder, like a year and a half into it. And I'll still say to this day, like, I'm an anorexia survivor, because anorexia, this is something Livia Sarah also talks about, is literally parasite, and it wants to kill you, but it's yourself against yourself. So basically in November of third year, the timeline is going to go, this is a bit funky, because a lot of it's kind of blank memories at this point. So I started FBT. I know a lot of people aren't fans of this. I avoided inpatient treatment by the skin of my teeth. By that I mean my weight was purely just like the next level, then higher than it would if it had gone any lower. I would have been immediately put into hospital, which is something that I was so proud of at the time. So family-based therapy, I'm lucky. My mum, and to this day, she is my biggest supporter. She advocated for me so much. She wasn't a huge fan of it either. It's not autism friendly in the slightest. One thing about me, I hate metal cutlery. I hate the feel and just of metal in my mouth. So I always use plastic kids cutlery. I don't care how ridiculous it looks. But basically my head nurse was like, absolutely not happening. She was convinced this was the eating disorder trying to take control. I also have a thing with plates, hate them. I don't like how flat they are. I will literally eat pizza slices out of a bowl. I eat everything out of a bowl. And he was like, going, absolutely not. That's not the story. And again, this has been the case since I was like 3. So that was hard to navigate around, and it has resulted in a good bit of trauma as well, which I've gotten through. And I just, like, honestly, not even for my own sensory needs, I also, anytime I use plastic cutlery now, there's always tiny little part of it is done out of sheer spite. But despite, like, it was simply, but also the nurse at the time, they had no training in autism, and he was a sound guy and everything, but it was just really irritating. And also with FBT, what I found really hard, as soon as I haven't looked at by the way, I'd just like to make it clear, I haven't looked at my weight in at least 4 years, haven't looked at my blood pressure either, even though I couldn't tell you what the numbers mean. I haven't looked at my weight and blood pressure in at least 4 years. And like, as you were saying, Aisling, like, you let your GP manage all that. I was essentially the same with my psychiatrist, and I'm due to see my GP, but I haven't seen her in like 3 months because just GP situation in Ireland is insane. But side rant. But yeah, so I actually can't start. So I had incredible support from school. It's actually like not even funny, but so I just put emojis over my teachers' faces because they just, yeah, okay, I can see that grey bar is covering, but it literally just says school support. And so yeah, they wouldn't, I know they wouldn't mind their face being on the same way, but just really, like, who knows, maybe they'll come see me, who knows. They won't. But yeah, so my mum was great. She immediately kept the school in the loop. She was communicating with them all the time. These 2 photos are from my graduation day. Just here, I won the Promotion of Inclusivity Award the day before I graduated a couple of weeks ago. And this was also on my graduation day. It was just an incredible, I was just so lucky. My year head they really encouraged me I just had an amazing support network. I'm kind of waffling now and my dog is doing up. But like, my mum was in the loop with them. They were emailing she was emailing at least once a week with my year head. My form shooter, like, for 10 o'clock every morning. She was my rock. She was like, my year head and form shooter advocated so much for me. And my SEN coordinator, he was really helpful, just when I needed to get out of class and just breathe. I didn't, in terms of lunchtimes at school, I kind of found I would kind of deliberately force myself to eat around others, because then I suppose I didn't have the same struggles that I think a lot of other people would have. I think it was just knowing that my support network was either my mum a phone call away, or my teachers, who were literally just a knock on the door in the staff room. And I'd also just like to share here, my mum is an SNA and does incredible work, and she's just absolutely, I'm so blessed to have her in my life and have the work that she's done for me. So yeah, again, I sat my junior cert with anorexia. I was about halfway recovered by then, I think. And yeah, I did it in a room completely on my own. I was allowed as many breaks as I so pleased. I think I only took like 2 though the entire time, because I really enjoyed seeing the exams. I didn't get distinctions. I got all higher merits and then not graded in art, which I always find really funny. But yeah, and it was just really, and then my invigilator happened to be an SNA as well, and I was just supported by really incredible people, which I know is not the case for all. But I suppose if there's a bit of advice to offer here, it would be like, if like, network with the school, keep them in the loop, because you'd be surprised with how supportive someone can be. I have met people that have literally had to change schools, which has been, like, sounds so stressful. And being autistic as well, that would be so traumatic. But it's also like listening to your own needs and stuff. Yeah, so I sat out of PE basically for all of 3rd year, which, again, I went to a very academic school. So people would actually be like, oh, I wish I could sit out of PE as well so I could study. And I was like, kind of looking back, I'm like, you don't, like, I was literally dealing with the most deathly psychiatric condition. You didn't want to be in my situation. And it didn't really faze me at the time, but now when I look back on it, I don't know how I didn't get so triggered. But yeah, and it was just knowing that, like, especially with my teachers teaching in such high-performing academic school, they never made me feel like I was being a burden on them or their time. So I'm just going to touch on recovery now. My slides do not want to cooperate with me. Oh, wait. Oh my God, sorry. And so in terms of recovery, yeah, I did FBT. It was, it was tricky because they don't cater to, and I actually covered most of my points when I was sharing my story, but just the second my weight reached the like healthy range, they were like, okay, bye. And to a certain, and a good part of that is due to like, you know, the way our current health system is, and the waiting lists are like so long and all that. But as soon as I got to a healthy weight, they were like, bye. So I was physically recovered, but mentally I was like, I struggled so much because I was like, but what am I supposed to do? Like, because my meal plans from then were like, it was the food there was to like keep my weight going. So I was like, do I have to keep putting on weight? How do I maintain it? And then I was like, if I have to maintain it, then I may as well just lose it to be on the safe side. And yeah, it was really, really hard. Going into TY, I thought the structure would kill me, which it did for parts of it. But I actually found I was able to, first of all, my mom, again, through therapy, like she held my hand through every single meal and challenge and fear food. And to that, I couldn't be more grateful. But then in TY, I was actually able to focus on my own interests a lot. And my school were still really supportive, and particularly my TY coordinator. And yeah, I spent every Sunday going for walks in nature with my mom, like we used to when I was a child. We kind of started doing a lot of activities that we'd have done when I was a child back in Wicklow. And yeah, so I think I also, as distractions, like to deal with guilt from meals, I would like back when it was third year, I would just surround myself in my studies. And I think what helped me a lot was if I don't, my pure motivation was to do well, not to get a distinction, but to do well. And my motivation was then like, well, you can't study, you can't remember anything if you don't eat. And as hard as it was, that was like the only thing keeping me from restricting at the time. And yeah, so again in TY, I focused on my own like interest. I got really into crochet. Like I think one of my maths teachers got me into crochet, and that was like literally that was my escape. That and Netflix, I did literally for all of TY basically. I also found just spending time in nature, going back to like my childhood and like experiencing that childhood wonder again, and being in nature now, like with my dog, is still like one of my favorite things, provided it's not too hot. Like literally, I can't handle anything higher than 12 degrees. So yeah, I suppose it eventually got to a point where, so after FBT, I did go through a phase, and I still do struggle with this at times, with binge eating. And obviously I won't go into too many details. I don't want to trigger anybody unnecessarily, but because I just didn't understand. And now it's just like, if I don't plan my meals, it's like that most likely will lead to a binge, because otherwise I need that structure. Because I also just was like, the idea of making a decision in the moment of what to eat stresses me out so much. And I'm able to cope with that much better these days, but there are still days where it's really hard for me. But anyway, it got to a point where I eventually was able to accept my body as it was. And I was like, and yeah, sorry, I'm kind of mumbling, but just that acceptance it's kind of, I wouldn't call it peace, but it's kind of truth you can make with yourself. I don't really know how to explain it. I wish I could say something more intelligent about recovery. But I've also there were parts of TY that the lack of structure I found so traumatic that I kind of have blanked out. But just kind of going into like life after anorexia, I could not, like, so as I said, I did struggle a lot with binge eating, but I have support and coping mechanisms for that. I got my smile back. I basically hadn't smiled in so long. Essentially, I learned how to live again, and I didn't go, like, again, I was lucky. I suppose my autism diagnosis kind of protected me in after recovery, because it was because like obviously I didn't have too bad of a life to get back to, but there were also a lot of things in my future. I'd been accepted onto the youth leadership team, which would go on to become like catalyst for my life. I can't even explain it, just so incredible. I sat my exams. The fact that I made it to sixth year, some of my teachers, not in a callous way, but just genuinely would have thought I wouldn't have physically made it. sixth year, and I graduated, and I literally just finished my leaving cert yesterday, and I'm in a I don't want to say I'm in an amazing place, but I'm in a pretty decent place compared to where I was a couple of years ago. I've been able to travel. I've been able to go visit where my dad grew up on the Bavarian-Austrian border again, in Germany. Again, YLT has brought, just to name a few, I've spoken at the National Autism Conference, we've met Ombudsman for Children, we've met former Minister Anne Braggett, and we were just back in April, it was like, I think just a couple of days after the Pope died, or even the day, like literally 2 days after the Pope died, this is us here outside the European Parliament, where we met MEP Maria Walsh. Also, because European politics is one of my special interests, this was such an incredible experience. I don't even know where to begin with that. I've made incredible friendships through AsIAM as well. Like, one of my closest friends is like taught me how to cross stitch and stuff, and just really like these friendships have brought out this parts of myself that I didn't even know were there, and I'm kind of getting to know this new person, like post anorexia Isabelle. And again, public speaking, like just unbelievable experiences. Like, I haven't even been able to process yet. And I think so. I only got my dog about just after my mocks. But Mabel has. If I'd had Mabel back when I was at my lowest, God knows how much better it would have been. But she's here now, and just as I'm speaking, she is like a little fluffy piranha trying to chomp all my fingers off. She turns 6 months old next week. I just think, like, if you can have animals and if you can tolerate animals, have them, because they actually do so many wonders and they're just amazing things. Just some final words I saw like hope could be used. It has an acronym that hold on, like pain ends. But and like again, yeah, okay, I don't have enough notes written for this, but it's not saying that, I wouldn't say anorexia ends, but you can fight it off. Like, I'm a huge history nerd, and my family are like all World War II nerds. Like, I like to use war analogy, as you saw in my video. Like, you can defeat it. You can, like, the whole point of a battle is to fight back. And yeah, I suppose for those of you in recovery, keep fighting that voice in your head that's telling you you aren't good enough. I know the pain that you're going through, and I know that it's so often it feels like a losing battle against yourself. But like, each day that you get up, each extra spoonful or mouthful or whatever that you take is another like middle finger to anorexia, because anorexia is not your friend. And I know that it can feel so contradictory at times, because it's literally it's like the anorexia, it's in your head, it's like a version of yourself. And yeah, like, just reach out. Like, don't let, like, obviously I'm an only child, so for like me, I was isolated. I was able to isolate hugely. I was looking at my mum, so she's an SNA obviously, so had worked school hours, so basically anytime I wasn't in school, she wasn't either, which was hugely helpful. And even now, she's been able to kind of intervene with students in her own school who maybe who she spotted early signs with, and have helped them in, has kind of been the spark that ignites the flame in early intervention. And as you were saying, Veronica, like, early intervention really is the best way. And my dog is like a complete piranha on me right now, but I just can't think of anything else to say, because I did not write nearly enough notes as I would have liked to for this. But also, like Aisling was saying, I did a lot of writing myself. I was actually just at the start of this, I've been meaning to do it for weeks, but I was just going back through an old diary, just I think when I was like just coming out the arse end of recovery, and just talking about how anorexia is like a parasite and stuff. And I yeah, okay, I'm going to keep waffling now, so I'm going to stop. Thank you everyone for listening and putting up with my rants. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that now. Sorry.
Thank you to all three of you. If anyone would like to put questions in the chat or in the Q&A, we can answer a few questions. But if I know there's a lot of private medical details that might come up in questions, so if you'd like to send them after the follow-up email that I send out tomorrow morning, I could link back in with Isabelle and Veronica and Aisling and get some answers for you that way as well. Okay. I think we might not have any questions for the live answer, but I'll definitely link back in if any questions come back in after the email, which might be more likely with a sensitive topic. But I want to thank everybody for coming. I'll be sending out a recording tomorrow morning with all of the links mentioned by all of our speakers. And if you have any questions or any suggestions for other webinar topics, we'd very much appreciate it. So thank you for spending some time with us today in the middle of what started as a beautiful heat wave, but is now wearing out its welcome. And hope everyone has a good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.